An unexpected encounter, how one poor girl changed a cold CEO's heart in just 30 minutes. Amy stood backstage, the cacophony of laughter and clinking glasses echoing like a distant thunder. She felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. This was it, the moment that might change her life. A high-profile charity gala, filled with the elite, glittering city skyline as their backdrop. She took a deep breath, made her way to the stage, and caught sight of Mark, the icy CEO, a man reduced to a shadow by his greedy pursuit of power. With each heartfelt word, she poured her soul into the audience. "My mom works 2 jobs just to keep the roof over our heads." Her voice trembled slightly, a quick glance at her rough childhood flashed in her mind. She is a fighter, like so many of us in this neighborhood. Hands shook slightly, but her passion burned bright. The crowd leaned in, some spellbound, others indifferent. Among them, Mark stood impassive, dismissing her story as just another ploy to tug at heartstrings. But then Amy spoke about her neighbors, how Mr. Lopez always shared his fresh vegetables and Mrs. Johnson baked cookies for the kids. A ripple of emotion danced through the room, and she told them about the kindnesses woven into their community, the genuine connection that held them together despite their struggles. Suddenly, a flicker of something shifted in Mark's eyes as he listened intently. Each word Amy spoke chipped away at the facade he had built, forcing him to confront the chasm between his world and hers. She was not just a girl from a rundown neighborhood, she was a beacon of hope, her spirit undeniable. Yet just as the air began to thrum with possibility, their moment was interrupted by the urgent vibration of Mark's phone, a cruel reminder of the demands pulling him back to his ruthless reality. "I can't promise I have the power to change things," he said, the words heavy as concrete stones. "The business world isn't kind. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Amy's gaze caught fire, fierce and unyielding. "You have a choice, Mark. How can you sleep at night knowing you have the power to change lives?" They were no longer just a CEO and a girl, they were 2 souls wrestling with their truths. Around them, conversations slowed, and the crowd became mere whispers, captivated by their exchange. Mark felt his resolve tremble. The urgency of the corporate world pressed against his shoulders like a weight, but here stood Amy, a stark reminder of what really mattered: people. "But what about my company? My shareholders?" He argued, more to himself than to her. As doubt seeped into him, the tension escalated, laughter replaced by a brewing storm of relevancy, a battleground of convictions. Amy's fierce conviction ignited something dormant inside him, shaking the very foundations of his world. The evening air crackled as their hearts beat in sync, both standing at a crossroads, with decisions echoing in the city lights. But just as their emotional summit reached its peak, the harsh reality of his company loomed large, threatening to pull him back into the shadows. Would he let go of the safety that had long defined him, or could Amy's unwavering hope finally break through the walls he fortified over the years? In that suspended moment, the question remained: could connection outweigh the comfort of power, igniting a flame of change? Amy took a step closer, her voice intense. "Mark, this isn't just about your company or your shareholders. It's about real lives like mine, like my mom's. We're not numbers. We're stories." Her eyes pierced through the corporate veneer he wore so carefully. Mark's heart raced. The weight of her words pressed against him, and for the first time in years, he felt a struggle within himself. He was so used to living in black and white, but here was Amy, painting his world in vibrant colors. Just then, the familiar chime of another notification pulled him back, reminders of meetings, deadlines, and his lofty expectations crushing down like a tidal wave. He looked at his phone, momentarily distracted, but it felt like a betrayal. The contrast between the urgency of his professional life and the raw authenticity of Amy's plea lay before him in stark relief. What if? What if I lose everything? Mark finally admitted, his mask slipping ever so slightly. There's a lot at stake. My reputation, my role. Amy shrugged a shoulder, her determination unwavering. And what if you gain something more valuable? What if you become a voice for those who don't have one? If you can use your position for good, people will respect you even more. She captured his gaze, trying to break through the wall that loomed between them, the chasm of ambition and morality that felt insurmountable. A flicker of doubt crossed Mark's face. The endless pursuit of profit had consumed him, replaced compassion with calculations. Yet, here was Amy, an embodiment of courage, a spark that ignited unease in the core of his singular ambition. Maybe you're not just a businessman, she added softly. Maybe you could be a leader. A hush fell over the audience as whispers faded into silence, and hopeful eyes turned to Mark, waiting for him to respond. Their anticipation was palpable, the energy electric. Mark stood there, wrestling with his thoughts, the warmth of the moment weaving through him like a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters. What would that mean for my company? He finally asked, his voice low and uncertain. It means you would lead with humanity, not just profits, Amy replied, her voice steady. Be the example. Show your shareholders that a different path exists, one that benefits everyone. Mark opened his mouth, yearning to speak, but the words felt trapped somewhere deep within him. The gargantuan structure of his world seemed to shift as the reality of Amy's message sank in. The idea floated like a bud ready to bloom in that moment. He understood the power he could wield with his choices. He glanced around the crowd, the faces molded with hope and expectation. The silence was thick with tension. I have to think about this, he finally said, his voice betraying uncertainty yet laced with newfound possibility. As the audience emitted a collective sigh, Amy's heart sank slightly. She wished he would dive in, leap toward the change. But maybe, just maybe, planting the seed was enough for now. Take your time, but remember, she said, her gaze never leaving his, we don't have forever. With that statement hanging in the air, Mark turned away, his heart a turbulent sea of thoughts and emotions. Amy looked on, a flicker of hope mingled with apprehension. As the night continued to swirl around them, one undeniable truth loomed large: the future of their paths, his power against her passion, had yet to be determined. What would Mark decide when faced with the choice that could alter everything? In the shadow of the gala's extravagant lights, a choice loomed that could either stay buried in the dark of corporate ambition or shine brightly in the light of change. The gala buzzed around Mark as he stepped away from the crowd, his pulse quickening with every breath. He wandered into a quieter corner, where the soft glow of candlelight flickered against the walls, and the noise dimmed to distant echoes. He felt as if the room had shrunk, tightening around him, trapping him between his past and a future he had never considered. He leaned against the cool edge of a marble column, thoughts racing. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw Amy's face, the fire in her eyes sparking something deep inside him. Was it dread? Or could it be hope? The idea of leading with humanity felt foreign, yet tantalizing, like stepping onto a path he'd never seen before. Mark's phone buzzed again, but this time, he silenced it, shoving it into his pocket. He didn't want distractions, not right now. Not when the stakes felt so profoundly personal. It was ironic, the more he distanced himself from his corporate life, the clearer he could see the truth of Amy's words. Meanwhile, Amy stood with a group across the room, her demeanor shifting from hopeful to anxious. She had risked everything by speaking out, putting her heart on the line. She'd been prepared for resistance, maybe even anger, but Mark's hesitance scared her. What if he walked away? What if the chance to spark change dissipated into the evening glow? Questions filled her mind, sending waves of doubt crashing over her. Would he ever understand the weight of the choices he faced? Amy, are you okay? Her friend Zoe asked, tugging gently on her arm. I just wonder if I did the right thing, Amy confessed, her voice a whisper. What happens if he doesn't take this seriously? Zoe took a breath, her eyes steady. You did your part. Not everyone can be ready for change. But look at him, he's thinking. That's a start. Amy nodded, trying to absorb that sentiment, but the shadows of fear loomed large. She couldn't shake the feeling that the moment was slipping away. Back in the corner, Mark pulled himself from the chaos in his mind. What if he chose authenticity over safety? What if he did lead with humanity? The thought bloomed into something vast and new, filling the space where self-doubt once resided. He straightened, determination rising. He had always been a risk-taker in business, why should this be any different? His decision could ripple through the very fabric of his company, changing lives for the better. But could he really do it? Could he pivot away from the profit-driven culture that had defined his career and embrace a role focused on compassion? With resolve, Mark turned on his heel and started moving back toward the vibrant heart of the party, searching for the one person who had ignited this pivotal moment in him. As he approached, he locked eyes with Amy, who noticed him before he spoke. The depth of her gaze grounded him. She stood there, courage personified, waiting just a heartbeat longer for what he might say. Amy, he began, a rush of adrenaline fueling his voice. I want to talk. But before he could continue, the ground beneath them trembled with the tension of expectation. The air felt charged, a moment suspended in time. And just when he thought he could find the words, a loud commotion erupted from the other side of the gala, drawing everyone's attention like a magnet. Voices raised, laughter spilled over like a tidal wave, and suddenly the space that had felt so intimate morphed into a sea of distraction. Mark clenched his fists, torn between the chaos and the determination blossoming within him. Would he let this moment pass? Would he let fear and noise take control, or step into the light he now sensed at the end of this dark corridor he had walked for so long? As Amy's heart raced, she could feel the tension shift once more. This was not finished, she could sense it. The stakes had raised, and both knew they would have to navigate more than just corporate morals. Would he seize the opportunity before it vanished, or would they both drown in the noise? Mark hesitated, the raucous laughter and chatter washing over him like a flood. He felt the moment slipping through his fingers. His heart beat furiously, urging him toward Amy, yet the cacophony pulsed around them, a loud reminder of everything he'd ever known. Hey, Mark. A familiar voice called from the crowd. It was Brian, his assistant, the embodiment of everything Mark had been trying to step away from. The tension eased slightly, giving way to a sense of urgency. Mark turned, forcing himself to respond despite the simmering fire in his chest. Yeah. He replied, keeping his eyes on Amy, who still held his gaze, a mix of hope and frustration swirling in her expression. I need you for a sec. Come on. Brian waved him over, oblivious to the moment that hung in the air. Mark felt the pull of his work, the responsibilities that had shaped his past, but his resolve surged tonight, he could change everything. Just a minute. He called back, taking a step toward Amy. The smiles of partygoers blurred in his peripheral vision. They didn't matter now, she did. With each stride, he broke through the noise that felt more suffocating by the second. He focused solely on her as if she were the lighthouse guiding him away from the stormy sea of expectations back towards solid ground. As he reached her, Amy's expression softened, but doubt still lingered there. You were saying? The question was heavy, loaded with implications. I don't want to lose this moment, he admitted, his voice quieter now, just for her ears. I've been thinking about what you said about leading with humanity. It feels like I've been trapped in a cage, and you've just handed me the key. Amy's breath caught, her heart racing at his words. Did he mean it? Then let us open the door together, she urged. This isn't just about you, Mark. It's about everyone affected by the choices made at that table. He could see it in her eyes, a sparkle of hope mixed with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. What if I screw it up? He asked, vulnerability cracking through his usually composed veneer. I don't have all the answers either, she replied, her sincerity cutting through the noise still swirling around them. But if we don't try, we'll never know. The weight of her truth settled in his chest. He had built a career on calculated risks, yet this felt different. It was personal, raw. He could feel the warmth radiating from her, a stark contrast to the cold corporate world he typically inhabited. I need to let them know I care, Mark said, conviction filling his voice. Not just about the bottom line, but about the people, the lives at stake. Yes. Amy beamed, her enthusiasm infectious. That's the first step. Speak up before the night is over. Share your vision. You'll surprise yourself. But just as they shared a moment of understanding, another loud ruckus erupted. A clatter of glasses shattered the calm. The lights flickered dangerously overhead, pulling both of them into a temporary panic. All eyes turned to the center of the gala where people were murmuring. A rising tension gripped the room. What is going on? Mark whispered, instinctively moving closer to Amy as she scanned the crowd. I don't know, but we can't let this steal our chance. Whatever is happening, it can't drown out the truth we need to speak, Amy said firmly, her eyes shining with determination. Mark nodded, taking a deep breath. No more hesitating. As he steeled himself, ready to reclaim the moment, a sudden shout cut through the air, sending shivers down their spines. We need to evacuate. Evacuate? Both turned to face the unfolding chaos, uncertainty looming like dark clouds overhead. What would they face next? Would Mark still find the courage to break free from his past amidst the chaos that threatened to overwhelm them? The night was just beginning, and everything was about to change. The crowd erupted into a frenzy as the urgency of the situation set in. Panic tightened the air, twisting stomachs and raising voices. Mark felt the weight of the chaos swirling around him, yet there was something or someone keeping him anchored. Amy's presence transformed the cacophony into a muffled backdrop. Stay close, he urged, grabbing her hand with a firm grip. The warmth of her skin sent a jolt of clarity through him. Together, they navigated the sea of partygoers, many of whom were already rushing toward the exits. The opulent ballroom once filled with laughter and twinkling lights now seemed like a maze of uncertainty. Mark's heart raced, not just from fear but from the impulse to take charge. What do we do? Amy shouted over the escalating commotion. Mark scanned the room, spotting a cluster of his colleagues who appeared frozen in shock. His instincts kicked in. We need to lead them out, we can't panic. He turned to face Amy. Follow my lead. We'll make sure everyone gets out. Their eyes locked, a silent promise exchanged between them. He felt an electric surge of hope. They could do this together. All right. She nodded, her face a mixture of determination and anxiety. Let's guide them to the nearest exits. With Amy by his side, Mark moved toward the group, rallying the lost faces as though they were his team waiting for direction. Everyone. We have to stay calm. Follow us this way. His voice cut through the turmoil with surprising authority. As they began ushering people toward safety, a sudden realization washed over him. This moment felt so much larger than himself. He wasn't just a CEO tonight, he was a part of something bigger, a community at risk. And Amy was the spark igniting that change within him. Over here. Amy's voice rang out, sharp and clear as they reached a large set of double doors. A crowd pressed against the exit, unsure if it was safe to leave. Let us keep moving. Mark called, his heart pounding as he stepped up onto a nearby table to gain everyone's attention. I know it's scary, but we must evacuate. Trust us. The frightened faces turned toward him, seeking reassurance. He took a deep breath, his earlier hesitations dissolving. We're all in this together. We need to help one another. Let us go. Amy followed his lead, rallying the crowd, her voice lifting over the din. People began to move, some hesitantly, others more willingly, as if buoyed by the newfound confidence in their leaders. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Mark noticed Brian, standing toward the back, still frozen in shock. He hesitated, torn between the urgency of the moment and the familiar pull of guilt. "Amy, I need to help him," Mark shouted, and without waiting for a response, he jumped off the table and sped back through the crowd. "Brian!" he yelled, cutting through the chaos towards his assistant. The look on Brian's face told him everything he needed to know, fear mixed with confusion. But as Mark reached him, he grasped Brian's shoulders, grounding him. "It's okay. We have to get out together. Come on." Brian blinked rapidly, the fog of uncertainty briefly lifting. "Right. Let us go." They raced back toward the exit, the thrumming of fear slowly morphing into determination. Mark glanced at Amy, who had successfully steered a small group toward safety. She caught his eye, and for a fleeting moment, he could see the flicker of hope lighting up the chaos. The moment was electric. They were doing this together. But doubt crept back in, gnawing at his resolve. Would he truly find the courage to lead beyond this night, beyond merely escaping the physical danger? As they emerged into the night air, the stars seemed to twinkle with promise, but Mark knew the real test was still ahead. He had to reckon with his choices, face the truth of who he had been, and who he wanted to become, a man not just of business, but of heart. "Mark!" Amy's voice broke through his thoughts, snapping him back to the present. "What's next?" she asked, eyes bright with an urgent curiosity. In that moment, Mark realized he stood on the precipice of change. And he didn't want to step back. "Next," he breathed, "we find a way to make a difference." But how? As he looked at Amy, he felt the weight of the question hanging heavily between them. Would the chaos from that night truly propel him into a new future? Or would it simply become another moment lost to the past? Mark took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs, clearing away the remnants of adrenaline still racing through him. He stood outside the ballroom, surrounded by those who had escaped with him, their faces painted in shades of relief mixed with lingering fear. He felt the weight of possibility pressing down on him, a barrage of emotions flickering in his chest like the stars above. "What do you mean, make a difference?" Amy's question echoed in the stillness, her brow furrowed in concern. She was so close, her hand still in his, and he could feel that connection sparking something deep inside him. Mark turned to face her fully, letting go of the crowds that remained behind. "I don't know yet," he admitted, the weariness pooling in his voice. "But tonight showed me that I can't just go back to my old ways. I've been so wrapped up in my own world, I've forgotten about the people who matter." Amy's eyes softened. "You've been leading, Mark. You didn't leave anyone behind." For a brief moment, he thought about how he had felt charging into that chaotic room, the clarity of purpose cutting through the panic. But it's more than just saving face or making decisions in the office. It's about truly connecting with people. Helping, being present. The mingled sounds of sirens in the distance brought him back to the reality of the night. "We should check on the others. Make sure everyone is okay," Amy suggested, glancing back toward the ballroom entrance where people stood huddled, discussing the events of the night. Mark felt a rush of gratitude. "You're right. Let us make sure they have everything they need." As they walked back into the venue, he noticed the faces around him appearing less frantic, colors beginning to emerge from the gray fear. With Amy beside him, he felt stronger. Together, they moved from group to group, offering comforting reassurances, checking for injuries, and even finding laughter in shared disbelief of what had just happened. Through it all, one thought kept surfacing in Mark's mind: this moment was not just about surviving, it was an awakening. A flicker of light setting an unfamiliar course for change. Then, as they approached the exit again, Mark's eyes caught sight of a young girl sitting quietly on the steps. She couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. Her red dress was crumpled, and her tear-streaked face wore a look of confusion. Mark felt a pull in his heart. "Hey there," he crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Are you okay?" She shrugged, her small frame trembling. I lost my mom. Mark felt his heart clench. What is your name? Emily, she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily, we'll find your mom. You're safe now. Mark glanced at Amy, who nodded, understanding the unspoken urgency between them. With determination fueling him, he said, let us make sure Emily isn't alone. Amy, can you help me look for her mom? Of course, she replied without hesitation, and the two of them sprang into action once again. As they broke away from the crowd, Mark didn't just feel like a leader, but a protector. He also felt a swell of hope rising within him as he realized he stepped into a new role, one that involved empathy and care. Mark, Amy said, catching up to him, you're really changing. I'm proud of you. He offered her a tentative smile, but the warmth in her words filled him with a deep sense of purpose. Thanks, Amy. I hope I can keep it up. But even as he said it, a flicker of doubt danced in the back of his mind. Would this newfound sense of responsibility become a fleeting feeling? Just an impulse triggered by the night's chaos? As they reached the far end of the ballroom, their search for Emily's mother began, each moment heavy with uncertainty, threaded with the hope of finding what they were searching for. Then, out of nowhere, the ground trembled beneath them. A loud crash sounded from the remaining crowd as the lights flickered ominously. Mark! Amy screamed, eyes wide with panic as she grabbed his arm. What was happening? Would this night take another turn for the worse? Mark's heart raced as he turned toward the sound, adrenaline surging anew. Just then, he realized the most important mission of his life was beginning, and he had no idea where it would lead. All he knew for sure was that together, they had to face whatever was coming next. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as the tremor beneath him intensified. The chaotic noise of the ballroom morphed into a cacophony of panic, and he instinctively stepped closer to Emily, shielding her from the onslaught of the moment. He could see fear etched on Amy's face, a mirror of his own turmoil. What is going on? Amy shouted over the rising din, her voice barely cutting through the shouts and cries around them. I don't know. Mark replied, his mind racing as he scanned the room. He looked at Emily, who was now gripping his arm tightly, her eyes wide with terror. He wished he could sweep away the fear swirling in the air, but they were all caught in it together. As he searched for the source of the disturbance, he could feel the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Protecting Emily wasn't enough, he had to help everyone. Stay close to me, Emily, he said, trying to project calmness he didn't actually feel. They moved through the crowd, feeling the thump of footsteps echoing in the marble hallway alongside them. Mark spotted a group of people rushing towards a back exit. This way, he urged, leading Amy and Emily towards the apparent safety of the door. Just as they reached the exit, a loud crash reverberated from the ceiling. Light fixtures shook, and the sound of glass shattering filled the air. Get down! Mark shouted, pulling Emily close to him. Amy ducked beside them, eyes filled with determination. The chaos seemed to slow for a moment as they huddled together, the rest of the world around them refracting against the glare of the ballroom's emergency exit lights. Mark took a deep breath, refocusing his energy. He realized he needed to be their anchor. Listen, everyone. He called out, his voice steady despite the shaking ground. We need to stay calm. Follow us outside, one at a time. We're going to make it out together. Emily looked up at him, the fear in her eyes heavy with the vulnerability of a child. In that moment, Mark's heart couldn't help but overflow with determination. He wasn't just a leader, he was a protector, someone who could give hope in a hopeless moment. They continued guiding people out, Mark ushering them one by one, helping to create order in the chaos. He could see other familiar faces, colleagues that he'd only shared superficial conversations with before. Now, they were united in this moment of desperation. Mark! Amy shouted again, pulling him from the edge of the storm that raged in his mind. Look, there's more people trapped near the stage. He swiveled to follow her gaze. A small cluster of attendees stood frozen, confused amidst the ringing flashes of fear around them. "We'll help them," he yelled back, adrenaline igniting his sense of urgency once more. Mark had rediscovered his purpose. But as they made their way toward the stage, the ground shuddered again. The lights began to flicker with an alarming intensity. A loud crack echoed above them, and debris began to rain down. "Move!" Mark yelled, grabbing Emily's hand and pulling her away. He felt a surge of panic. If they didn't hurry, he could lose her, too. "Please," he whispered to himself, urgency clenching his throat. Not again. But as they turned to escape the chaos, he saw her. A glimpse of a figure standing just outside the ballroom, looking back with wide, frantic eyes. Could it be Emily's mother? Was relief within grasp after everything they had just endured? Heart pounding, Mark blurted out, "That's her. Emily, your mom is just outside." He felt a rush of hope fill him, but would they make it in time? Would they be able to navigate the dangerous rubble rushing toward them? Just then, as the ceiling began to crumble further, Mark realized something greater was at risk more than just their lives. Was he ready to commit to this newfound responsibility? Determined, they pushed forward, each step a battle against the chaos that surged behind them. But deep down, a new question lingered in his mind: what if they could truly change more than just their circumstances tonight? What if bravery could elevate not just him, but everyone around them? But as they reached for the exit, a crushing weight hit the ground beside them, the reality of their night shattering all over again. Had they lost their chance? In that critical moment of impending loss, Mark took another deep breath, his eyes steady on Emily and Amy. There was no turning back now. They were at the brink of both chaos and salvation, but what would emerge from the dust? The air thickened with panic as Mark grappled with the sight of Emily's mother just outside the chaotic ballroom. It felt like a lifeline extended toward them, but time was slipping away. He turned to Emily, whose small frame trembled as she searched his face for reassurance. "Hold on tight," he instructed, squeezing her hand. They needed to be quick, stay close. With every fiber of his being, Mark pushed through the throngs of terrified attendees. The trembling ground beneath their feet seemed intent on pulling them back, urging them into the shadows. A series of new, hair-raising cracks echoed through the hall, fueling the fire of fear that rampaged within him. "Mom!" Emily's voice pierced the chaos like a beacon, and she pulled ahead slightly, drawn magnetically toward the figure beyond the exit. Mark matched her steps, the adrenaline surging as he navigated the fraying edges of despair surrounding them. The situation felt surreal, a dream unraveling in violent swells as smoke coiled down from the crumbling ceiling. "Emily, wait!" Mark managed to call, sensing that her eagerness could place them all at risk. But her small body was already past him as she darted forward, her eyes wide, glowing with that fleeting hope of reunion. He couldn't lose her in such a moment. Not here, not now. Mark surged after her. He was the protector. "Emily. Stay with me," he urged, desperation coloring his voice. He reached her just as she stumbled, steadying her grip on his hand while trying to run. A heavier piece of debris fell near them, landing with a thunderous crash. A group of panicked partygoers scattered, their screams blending into a haunting symphony of fear. Heart racing, Mark urged Emily forward, their feet sliding over the polished surface. "We can't stop." The world shifted, the exit door looming like an unknown destiny, surrounded by swirling dust and chaos. Suddenly, he felt Emily's hand go slack in his. The realization hit. "Emily." He twisted around, panic slamming into him like a physical force. She was staring up at the ceiling, still captivated by the figure outside. Her mother had taken a step closer, her arms outstretched, pleading for her child. "Mom!" Emily shouted again, but Mark's heart was already racing with alarm as he caught sight of the crumbling ceiling. "No. Emily, come on." He yanked her back just as the ground quaked violently once more. More debris plunged to the ground, sending waves of dust swirling around them. A sickening crack echoed, and Mark felt the gravity of the moment, the unbearable weight of fear that shattered what little hope still simmered in the air. With every ounce of resolve, he propelled them toward the exit, dodging pieces of the ceiling that plummeted to the ground. Keep running. As they finally reached the door, a burst of fresh air hit them like a slap. The moment felt electric, the risk yielding to a wild glimmer of hope. Emily's mother was just an arm's length away, eyes wide and frantic. "Mom! I'm here!" Emily cried, breaking free from Mark's grip and dashing into her mother's arms. Mark paused for a heartbeat, allowing himself to breathe, allowing the relief to wash over him. But even as joy flickered on Emily's face, beneath the bright surface lay the jagged edges of trauma. Reality crashed back in, and he glanced back at the ballroom, now a cacophony of screams, smoke, and confusion. This wasn't over yet. Others were still trapped. Others needed him. Swallowing hard, Mark turned back towards the chaos. Amy met his gaze, determination flaring in her expression. "We can't leave them," she shouted over the rising uproar. Caught in the pull of their shared resolve to help others, Mark nodded. "Let us go," he said, heart pounding. They had their chance to change everything, even if the risks were greater now than ever. Yet, as they stepped back into the swirling chaos, a chilling thought soared through Mark's mind. What if this was only the beginning? Would they be brave enough to face whatever darkness awaited them? The ballroom loomed behind them, one heartbeat away from another collapse, and their choices would soon define everything. Mark and Amy plunged back into the frenzied ballroom, the air now thick with despair and the pungent scent of smoke. Debris hung in the air like a dark cloud, and the echoes of terror felt almost tangible. The once festive environment morphed into a post-apocalyptic landscape, where laughter had been replaced by shouts for help. "We need to split up," Amy shouted over the roar, her voice a beacon amidst the chaos. "We can cover more ground that way." Mark thought about it, the fear creeping in, gnawing at his determination. "What if? Trust me. I'll check over there." She pointed towards a cluster of people trying desperately to help someone pinned under a fallen beam. "You could fine." He interrupted, forcing down his hesitation as adrenaline surged. "I'll go toward the kitchen area. It's usually a safe spot to find trapped folks." With a nod, they shared a brief, supportive smile that ignited a flicker of hope within him. Then they were off, each driven by an urgent need to save those who remained in peril. Mark weaved through the crowd, pushing against the tide of people flooding toward the exits. Each step pushed him further into the heart of the swarm, where anxious faces blended together like a nightmare come to life. The crumbling walls loomed around him, their cracks expanding as if mocking his resolve. He darted into the kitchen area, the smell of charred food overwhelming him. The chaos was less pronounced here, but the stillness was eerie, filled with the shadows of uncertainty. "Is anyone here?" he called, his voice echoing against the stainless steel surfaces. No response. Just whispers of fear and the sound of the destruction from the ballroom. Mark bit his lip, worry squeezing his chest. Then, a faint whimper reached his ears. He rushed toward the sound, following its threads of despair. There, he found a small group of people trapped behind a fallen table, their eyes wide with terror. "Help us!" a woman cried, her voice rising above the din. Mark kneeled, assessing the situation. "Is anyone hurt?" An older man nodded, cradling a young child who was visibly shaking. "She got hit," when his voice trembled. "Please, we need to get out." Finding his courage, Mark glanced around for a way to help. "Okay, listen. I need you all to stay calm. I'm going to lift this," he gestured to the table, "and I want you to crawl out one by one, all right?" The group nodded, hope flickering in their eyes. Mark felt his heart rate quicken as he prepared for the next move. The table seemed heavier than it should be as he gripped its edge. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. He heaved, the weight almost too much, and the table scraped across the ground. Gritting his teeth, he managed to lift it just enough for the first person to crawl out. "Go! Go!" he urged, adrenaline pushing him forward. One by one, they emerged, relief washing over their faces as they felt the air hitting their skin, fresh and real. Just as the last person slipped through, a thunderous crash echoed through the room. The floor shook violently, and the ballroom beyond began to tremble. "Move!" Mark shouted, adrenaline kicking into overdrive. He could see the entrance block deteriorating, falling debris threatening to cut off their escape. "Get to the back exit. Now!" With the group scampering into action, he felt a surge of pride. They were almost free. But just as they reached the end of their path, he turned to check on everyone, fear tightening his chest. "Is everyone out? Where's the child?" one of the women asked, panic blooming in her eyes. Mark's heart plunged. "What do you mean? She was right behind me." Frustration and self-doubt coursed through him as he realized the child had gone missing again. He knew time was slipping away, invisible hands were reaching for them. "Split up!" he shouted. "I'll take the left." The echoes of his voice faded as he darted into the adjoining room, searching frantically, breathing heavily. What if he couldn't find her? What if he failed them all? As he pushed a heavy door open, it groaned like a wounded animal, and his heart dropped. There she was, huddled beneath an overturned table, trembling in the darkness. "Hey, sweetie, I'm here," he said softly. "It's okay. Let us get you out of here." Just as he lifted her into his arms, the building shuddered again, and Mark knew they were racing against time. Would they make it out in time? Or was this ending about to spiral into a nightmare they would never awaken from? Mark held the small child tight, her fragile body trembling against him. He felt her heart racing, mirroring his own as they sprinted toward the exit. The ballroom was unraveling, and each tremor felt like the heartbeat of the very building. But he wasn't about to let fear overtake him. "Hold on, I've got you," he whispered, pushing through the chaos around them. The once elaborate gala was now a battleground of panic, yet one truth anchored him: he wouldn't let anyone be left behind. They burst into the main room where the atmosphere was a frenzy of screams and confusion. All around him, faces twisted with fear, and the flickering lights painted a grim picture of their reality. Yet, amid the fear, he caught sight of Amy, her voice cutting through the noise as she held a few survivors together, rallying them with a sense of calmness he couldn't help but admire. "Mark!" she shouted when their eyes met. "You did it! You found her!" Mark nodded, relief washing over him as he reached her. The little girl clung to him like a lifeline, her big eyes filled with trust. "We have to get everyone out," he urged, glancing at the quickly deteriorating structure. "Time is running out. Let us move." Amy rallied the others, her voice rising with authority. Mark felt a rush of gratitude swell in his chest. Hers was the spirit that would ignite change, the same courage he had felt from the moment they first locked eyes. He stepped forward with her and shouted, "Everyone, follow us. Stay close." Each step felt like a declaration of hope as they led the way to safety, weaving through the crowd of frantic partygoers. But just as they pushed toward the exit, the building quaked more violently than before. Mark staggered, barely managing to keep his footing. He glanced back in horror, watching chunks of the ceiling rain down. "Go! Keep moving!" he shouted, urgency flooding his voice as he pushed the small girl closer to Amy, who had turned to guide the others, ensuring their safe passage through the storm of chaos. He could see the determination etched into her features. One by one, they hustled to the door, the exit light shimmering like a beacon of salvation ahead, even as the ground beneath them roared its frustration. Mark's muscles burned with exertion, but the responsibility to protect those behind him fueled him forward. When they finally reached the threshold of freedom, he felt the weight of despair begin to lift. There, outside, the stars gleamed down on them as if the universe offered a collective breath of relief. "Everyone, keep going. Don't stop," he yelled, pushing the first few out the door. The last few remnants of the crowd fled through the door, and as Mark turned to help the last of them, he felt Amy's hand clasp his arm tight. "You did it, Mark. You brought them all out." He took a breath, knowing this wasn't over just yet. "Together, we did this," he replied earnestly, nodding toward the fading chaos behind them. He glanced back one last time. The ballroom was dismissing the last of its glamour, forever marked by the scars of the evening's frightful reality. "Mark." Amy's voice snapped him back to reality. "What's the plan now? We can't just leave, not after this. We need to help others, plan what comes next." He looked at her, the glowing light of ambition reflecting in her eyes. "You're right," he said firmly, excitement bubbling up inside him. "It's time for real change. We have to be the voices, the leaders who push for humanity in this corporate world." "Starting tonight," Amy affirmed, her enthusiasm infectious, igniting a fire in him that had long been dormant. Their eyes locked once again, and for a brief moment, it felt as if all the noise faded, replaced by a harmony of resolve. The adrenaline coursing through their veins was about more than just survival. It was about the power to transform, to connect with those they had saved and those still waiting for their voices to rise. Then Emily, the small girl he had saved, tugged on his sleeve, breaking their moment. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked, her voice laced with timid uncertainty. "Absolutely," he replied, kneeling down to her level. "We're all going to be okay. We're here, together." With the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, Mark felt a surge of purpose. His path was finally clear. He would stand beside Amy, speak for those who felt trapped, and change the narrative for others who found themselves lost in the world of corporate greed. Determination surged through him like the morning sun illuminating a new day. "Let's make a difference," Mark said, raising his voice to those around him, rallying their spirits for change. "Together, we're going to lift the veil on how this world sees people. We can reshape our future, ensure that every decision is rooted in compassion. Are you with me?" "Yeah!" shouted the crowd united behind him, voices intertwining in a loud chorus of hope. As the sun rose, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold, Mark knew he wouldn't let this moment slip away. Change was no longer just a dream, it was their reality, and he was ready to embrace it. "Let's get to work," he said, gripping Amy's hand firmly as he stepped forward into the light of new beginnings. "Be a part of this journey. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive stories that might inspire you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. I want to hear how this ending made you feel. Comment below. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Together, we can create change.